Welcome back. The O&G StrikeZone. Bryan Fulford, Marcus Green, Kelvin Rozier. We are breaking down the 2023 FAMU football season. We've gone through the deep dive of every player on the roster. You can't say you don't know who is on the roster. Just rewind, because we just went through a deep dive of every man on this squad. Great job again. Appreciate Marcus Green, Marcus doing a great job of helping to aggregate a lot of that stuff, and you can hear in the comments everything he said. Great knowledge about this group. So let's start with some offensive storylines, okay, and just some offensive expectations for this year. I'm going to start it off with talking about. I think this. I'll give you some numbers. The percentage of passing, because I know we always start with the quarterback position, right? We always start with the quarterback. I'm going to give you some numbers over the last 4 years for Coach Simmons. The quarterback position. Last year, completion percentage, 57.1%. In 21, 57.5%. In 19, it was 62.3%. And then in 2018, just under 60% at 59.8. Those were the Ryan Stanley years, those years. So I'm of the thought that Jeremy Musa, we want to see a significant improvement in the completion percentage. And I think if we get a Jeremy Musa that completes at least in the 63% where Ryan Stanley was his last year, that we're going to be looking at a guy who will probably pass for over 3,500 yards. And also, let me see, last year he threw for what, maybe 25 touchdowns. I think he could very well flirt with 30 touchdowns this year. And that's what we have to see. For this team to really function the way that I think we all want it to function, that's what it has to do. The last 3 years, Coach Simmons's quarterbacks have thrown just between 406 to 410 attempts. So we have not thrown more or thrown less the last 3 years. The only difference is the level of completions. Kelvin, you always on me about the quarterbacks. What's your thoughts on what the quarterbacking needs to be this year?
Well, I got 3 bullets, and I'm going to just do it for the offense in general for this year that are keys. Key number 1 for me is not a quarterback. It's the quarterback coach. It's Coach Simmons. Okay. And specifically his game day play calling. And I'm not even talking about the percentage of pass to run. I'm talking about the type of plays he calls situationally and how he chooses to use the many weapons. He's going to have a plethora of weapons in the backfield at tight end and receiver. I'm talking having 2 tight end sets. I'm talking have 2 back sets when necessary. I'm talking when we need to kill the clock, being able and committed to running the ball. So for me, the key to the offense this year, I'm not putting it solely on the quarterbacks or the players. I need to see Coach Simmons as a play caller as well as a quarterback developer. Since he's the position coach, I need to see number 2 develop, and I need to understand what we're doing on game day. And I'll give you an example of why I say that. So I was watching HBCU go, and I watched the homecoming game. We didn't score in the first quarter against Pine Bluff. And
we had a lot of games like that. We had a lot of games like that last
year. Yeah. And then there was a couple of plays where we had Xavier Smith trying to throw the ball, and one of them was an interception, and the other one could have been an interception, where we were doing trick fancy stuff, and we didn't have to. It made no sense. We were a better team than Pine Bluff. All we had to do is play football. So those are kind of things I'm talking about, where we don't get too cute, too fancy, and so forth, and we line up and play good assignment football, and we enforce our will. I need to see that on a more consistent basis from what Coach Simmons is doing. All right, then the bullet in them two is quarterback play.
Well, hold on a second. Let me bounce something off of you, because we heard Coach Henry come on the show and sort of talk about taking on the responsibility of being better at that role. So you're looking for Coach Simmons, but who? So are you saying it's Coach Simmons who's calling the plays? Because Coach Henry kind of gave us that.
Yes, he has a part in developing the play. I know that, you know, the first 20 plays generally are scripted, and he do it as a staff until, you know, Coach Simmons gets a feel of, you know, what the defense is doing, and then he's the play caller. He's the primary play caller on game day. Coach Henry can give some input and so forth, but he's the primary play caller. So yes, that's what I'm saying. I
got you. All right. What bullet two? Go ahead.
Bullet two, quarterback play. So typically, we got a team that's got a lot, as we said, about 40 teams, a lot of returning players, a lot of athletes. The offense can be very explosive. We weren't very explosive last year in the run game, pretty much dead last. And though we had players like Xavier Smith who were capable of making plays, and he looked good in terms of yards, but in terms of, you know, touchdowns, 30, 40, 50 yards plus, runs, 30, 40, 50 yard plus, we didn't have a lot of that. And because usually quarterbacks have like 3 traits if they're elite. Either they're a gunslinger like a Brett Favre, where they just you give it to them enough, let them throw the ball, they can just gun it. They're gonna take some risk, but they are high reward also. Or you got the other one where they're great athletes, like a Lamar Jackson, where or like the quarterback Travis Jordan across the street, where you can have a perfect defense and it don't matter because they make plays that you can't practice, you can't script for. They're elite athletes. Or thirdly, you got some guys that are just winners. They just make plays when the game on the line. One of the things I liked about Rashawn McKay, every time we got behind, every time he made a mistake, the very next drive we drove down, scored a touchdown. Every time. He was just a winner. He just made winning plays. So that's an intangible. And right now, for me, Moose is kind of not any of those things. He's just a solid starter. I need for him to take that next step where he's one of those things. Whether it's just the winning part, he's gonna make winning plays, or when he has open. I think the two biggest criticism right now as him as a starter is, of course, protecting the ball. Because if you think about the Alabama State game, the South Carolina State game in the fourth quarter, that was an issue. And so and the first two go hand in hand, because if you look at the Florida Classic last year, we talked about how we thought Coach Simmons did his best job in terms of game planning and what he put together. And conversely, Musa had probably his best game of the year and looked that way. So they tied at the hip. So I'm looking at those two things. Then my third bullet point, improved running game. And I think the first two, I think that would help both of them more than the critique I've given on both of them. If we can have a running game that's explosive, like with Bishop. I mean, you think about that game when the play he had against Alabama A&M 2 years ago. I mean, it was just a regular play. He hit that hole so fast and it was gone. Same thing when he late in the game against Bethune-Cookman at Florida Classic that year when he jumped into the stands. So we got to have the missing element for our offense is not the percentage of how much we run the pass. It's the explosive plays that we didn't have last year. That's what I need to see, along with protecting the ball.
Good stuff. I wish I could have found some stats on explosive plays. See, if I'd have known you were going to go down that route, we'd have been doing some research and say, man, we got to go and do some research on explosive plays. How many plays over X number of yards? You know what I'm saying? That's but that's good stuff. Good stuff. Marcus, come over to you now as we move over to the offensive side of the ball.
Well, I'm gonna take a different tack from Kelvin, not necessarily the 3 bullet points, but just, I guess, from my perspective, players to watch and players on the hot seat. So I agree with everything that Kelvin said. And I'll say in terms of players to watch, first and foremost, football is a QB-driven sport. They get all the accolades and they get all the rocks thrown at them when things. So Jeremy Musa, all eyes are going to be on him. And since he's entering his second year as the starter and his second year in the system and had a lot of preseason accolades from the SWAC and other publications, he's going to be the player to watch. And so the expectations are really high. Our second one that I believe, and we have a lot of veterans coming back at wide receivers. We have Jamari Shareed, we have K-Dot, we have David Manigo, but I'm gonna focus on Jamari Gassett, speedy transfer from University of Buffalo. He had a career total of 48 catches for 617 yards and TDs in 22 games at University of Buffalo before he transferred to us. And from a physical standpoint, and even looking at some of his highlights from University of Buffalo games and some of the spring practice highlights from previous years, he almost looks like a X-Man clone. So he could very well fit into the same mold and maybe the same routes if he's as a route runner as Xavier Smith. So I'm looking at him. And from the third player to watch, Cardell Thomas. Just look at some of the highlights that a friend of the show, Gerald from the TDL, from the Tallahassee Democrat, showed, and him going head up against Gentle Hunt and holding his own, and actually, keeping Hunt off during those simulations of the pass rush drills. He's him committing to FAMU, coming out of transferring from LSU, but being a 4-star athlete out of Southern Lab back in, I guess it was 2019, and the talent that he showed. So I'm keeping an eye on him to see how well he performs up to expectations for the offense. Now, on the hot seat, on that other side, well, Jeremy Musa, he got one hand on the hot seat and one hand on the player to watch. So I'm putting him in both categories because, he's on the hot seat because of that low 60% completion percentage from last year. And as we've mentioned a couple times, the memories of the Alabama State game where, it could have turned out differently on the bad side. Things have been taken advantage of from Alabama State's standpoint, but it could have been a blowout if we had not had 2 or 3 red zone turnovers on top of field goals that were missed, uncharacteristically missed. So we could have been looking at, instead of what I guess it turned out to be 21-14, we could have been looking at something like 38-14. Even if we missed one field goal, you would expect at least maybe 2 red zone, and minus those 2 red zone interceptions, and I think 2 of them were in the end zone. All 3 of them, but you look at that, so that kind of like gives you some pause. Like, we have Jeremy coming back, second year system, high expectations, but were those things anomalies, or is that who he is? And we managed through that. And once again, also on the hot seat, as you mentioned, the running back room. And ultimately, it was the least productive rushing attack on the SWAC and the bottom quartile in FCS. So the play calling, as Kelvin mentioned, the play calling and the execution up front with the offensive line that's coming with a lot of talent will dictate how far it goes. We still have to put some onus on the running backs as well to make sure they're doing what they're supposed to, making the right reads, cutting through the hole, doing what they need to do, and doing what they do best in terms of running and catching out of the backfield. So, and tied into that on the hot seat, even though Kelvin mentioned Coach Simmons is the main play caller, Coach Henry, you look at the offensive execution last year and compared to 2021, where we had basically 50% balance, as Bryan alluded to earlier. Then we kind of skewed back to almost a 55% pass run ratio last year. And the yardage really wasn't that different. We had maybe 200 more yards passing comparing the Jeremy Musa's first year to Rashawn McKay in 2021. So the play calling were almost statistically identical in terms of the number of pass plays called. The passing yardage slightly higher in terms of the yardage. We did have 1 fewer TD, but other than that, we need a lot more we need a lot more balanced play calling, improving the rushing game, and efficiency in the pass game. And also on the hot seat, execution and fundamentals, all the players. 2021, despite being a 9-win season, we were dead last in NCAAs in terms of penalties. Last year, we had good improvement. We were improved to reduce that we were still 104th versus dead last out of 130 in 2021. So there was modest improvement. We were 6th in the SWAC. So once again, reducing the number of penalties, focus, and I think the senior leadership and the experience that we have hopefully bodes well in reducing those numbers as well. And just from an offensive standpoint, sneaky pick, I try to put 1 or 2 on both offense and defense. And we know the names coming back, but I think Trevante Davis, who is reportedly having a good camp in 2022, and I believe he had an injury either early in the season or in preseason camp in 2022. So I'm going to list him, and there's a couple of names that come to mind, but I'm going to list him as the sneaky pick to kind of jump up there and be the third of the wide receiver of the returning core that we have between David Manigo and K-Dot to really show out. And I believe everybody's going to make contributions, but with 20 wide receivers, they're going to have to see who comes through. And he transferred in last year from Division II Wayne State in Michigan. And I don't recall if it was last year or a year before when they actually won the D2 national title. So I'm not sure if he's part of that title team, but I think his addition and his size will be my sneaky pick at wide receiver for this year.
I love how Marcus is putting folks on the hot seat. Marcus, hey, put it out there, Marcus. I love it, man. I love it. Okay, so for me, I already told you my thoughts and expectations about Jeremy Musa. Let me go over to running backs and wide receivers. I'll start with the wide receivers. I think, make sure I can find the Marcus Riley is an interesting name. Marcus Riley led Bethune-Cookman in receiving a year ago. Okay. Now, they didn't have a very prolific offense, but he still led the team in receiving. And I'm just going to, as I look up the stats, he led them 39 receptions, 563 yards. That's a 14.4 average, scored 5 touchdowns, which was second most. He was one behind Kamari Everett. So, Kamari Everett, who was, pretty much a doggone should have been an All-American level tight end, right? So next to him, Marcus Riley was the next guy. And if I'm not mistaken, I don't know, did Marcus Riley end up playing a little quarterback as well for them last year? I'm reading something and they said he did. But anyway, I look, we already know about Jamarie Shareed, who we're coming back expecting him to sort of be maybe one of the 1 or 2 guys, maybe next to an Oxendine, or I think Nicholas Dixon. I hope to see him have a good year. But I'm looking to see what Riley. I was interested to hear you, Marcus, talk about Jamari Gassett, but I'm going to look for Marcus Riley because I think Riley, knowing the SWAC, knowing the DBs in the SWAC, especially in the Eastern Conference, is an advantage. So that does give us a little bit of experience there, maybe ahead of a guy like Gassett. Something of note for just general casual folks, if you're looking for 85 this year, Manigo's not wearing 85 this year. Something I saw. David Manigo's wearing number 3 this year. So just in case you're looking for who's that big number 3 running out there, that's David Manigo, who'd been wearing number 85 the last couple seasons. So I just wanted to point that out to people. I already talked a little earlier about what I thought about the tight end, Kobe Gross, not Jacoby, but Kobe Gross. Jeremiah Pruitt is another name that is very interesting to me. Just from a size perspective, 6'5", 230. He's actually the biggest tight end of that core group. And we always talk about what are we going to do when we get inside the 10, 15-yard line? And Marcus, maybe we'll look at that in a second. What was our red zone offensive production like? We'll look at those interesting stats in a second. But he's a guy that I keep saying we always want to look at. We should be looking at from an offensive perspective there. Let me go over running backs, because I think a name that we often are looking past is Terrell Jennings. All Terrell Jennings has done since he's been at FAMU has been serviceable. He has been more than serviceable. He's been pretty doggone good at times. And it should be noted, Terrell Jennings, I don't know if it's Terrell or Terrell. I think it's Terrell. But he's played 32 games at FAMU, ran for 261 attempts, and at 1,081 yards, he's currently number 30 all time on the career rushing ladder at FAMU among career running backs. What's interesting is if he has what his average has been, which his average is about 33, 34 yards per game for if you do the math on the carries and put him at somewhere in the ballpark of 350 some odd yards, he could potentially move up to number 20. Could finish his career somewhere in the ballpark of 1,400 career yards. That'd put him into the top 20. If he has an even better season than what he's had the last, per average now, then you're talking 1,500 or more. And so that'll be interesting to see with this group. We pointed out this was a team that was last in rushing a year ago, averaged 94 yards a game, that's pretty bad. The only SWAC team to average less than 100 yards a game. Even Valley ran for 100 yards a game on average. So that's got to improve. Besides Jennings, I think the two names that we are thinking will most likely make the big difference is Kelvin Dean, who the grad transfer, spent 4 years at Florida Atlantic, only had 52 attempts in his 4 years. So coming out of Rickards High School, talk about fresh. Legs are fresh. I mean, you know what I'm saying? 52 attempts over 4 years. And then Jaquez Yant, 6'2", 220 something, looking like a man-child out there. He's only, in his past 2 years at Nebraska, he's only run a total of 67 attempts. Last year, it was the year that everybody recalled. No, take that back. It was his freshman year, 2 years ago.
Right.
That was the year where he only ran 20 times. Let me go back for a second. I said that wrong. His freshman year was when he ran 47 attempts. Last year, he only ran 20 attempts. So in that freshman year, when you see these highlights that are running on Twitter where he ran 13 carries for 127 yards against Northwestern, that was his freshman year. He also had a 6-carry, 60-yard game against Purdue. So we've seen big days for Jaquez Yant, and that's what we're hoping that we see this year, without a doubt. But the guy that I think you got to look out for is Leland Wilhoit. Before spring, let's go back to spring of 2022. This offense has been really good when guys like Azende Ray and Bishop Bonnet have played kind of out of the backfield and been pass catchers, but also sort of the lightning to thunder backs. Leland Wilhoit, now, who knows? Kelvin Dean might be that guy, but I think it's going to be – I think Wilhoit, because of his size, he was poised to be that guy for us, and then he got hurt. There were guys who tried to play that role last year, aren't with the team this year. So I'm looking at a Leland Wilhoit to kind of see what if he sort of reaches that level that I think he can and will. or can and has the potential to be, rather. And that's what's going to be really interesting to see with this offense. Do you want to briefly go through, Marcus, some of the analysis? Marcus did a great job, and I hate to leave it without showing it. Is some of this when we talk about this year, but just really looking at the offensive production from 2 seasons ago to last year, and maybe even projecting out to this year, what that might look like. That sound like a plan?
Sure.
All right. Let's take a look at some of those offensive production numbers there. And, you know, what we'll start off with, Marcus, I'll let you kind of go through what we have here on the offensive level.
Have to make that a little bigger. All right.
Hit full screen. Hit full screen, and then all of a sudden it comes up, and you'll see what everyone who's watching sees.
Yes. Well, the thought here was comparing our 2022 productivity versus 2021 in terms of the overall NCAA.com rankings, for all of FCS, and just to kind of see where we land. And this is going to be pretty exhaustive, but we looked at all the statistics on the offensive side. We have a similar analysis on the defensive side. And so, and the rank, you know, a green arrow up, it represents, okay, we improved versus our final season ranking compared to 2021, which we're kind of using as our baseline of offense and defense to kind of see how we improved. And we had some coaching changes. We went from, we had an offensive line coach, offensive coordinator who went to Austin P, and then 2021, and then we had Coach Joe Henry come back. So it's kind of an exercise to kind of look at that comparison. So if you look at third down percent, so of course we had one fewer game in 2022 where we didn't make the playoffs, where we had that extra game that counts statistically. So that's one thing you have to keep in mind. But we actually improved in terms of our third down percentage. We went up 12 spots compared to 2021. You can see, based on the attempts, the opportunities, and the percentage, where the green represents an improvement and the red numbers represents the number of successes. So we had 2 fewer successes, 16 fewer opportunities compared to 2021, and we had an improved percentage, a modest improvement in terms of the percentage. We look at fourth down, the same. We actually improved significantly. Big we went from, I guess, that 114th to 13th. So we had 3 more conversions compared to the previous year. We had 8 fewer attempts. So the opportunities declined, but we had a better conversion rate, as you can see from that percentage. So we went up almost a third, going from roughly 33% to 62.5%. First down offense had a decline, down 15 spots on the total rankings. We had 30 few, and this kind of belies what we talked about before in terms of the rushing attack. So we had 30 fewer first down from rushing. We had 17 more in comparison. From a pass game, we had 4 fewer as it relates to penalties. And overall, we dropped, we had 17 fewer overall total first downs compared to our 2021 output. Rushing offense, this is I'm sorry, I skipped one. Red zone offense, we went up 5 spots from 77 to 72, which doesn't really speak to explosiveness. That's basically like in the 50th percentile range out of the overall FCS landscape. So we put up some points, but we weren't mistaken for the Gulf Coast offense of Billy Joe in the season of '98. So
26 out of 49. Just to give context, I really want to jump in on that red zone. In terms of touchdowns, we had 49 opportunities. Well, we scored 49 times, but only 26 were touchdowns.
Yes,
last year,
and a lot of field goals, and actually had one more than we did in 2021. And so, look at our red zone percentage. It looks good, but we had opportunities. Once again, I don't want to harp on it, but it's going to be harped on. We had 3 shots against Alabama State at their crib, and those 3 ended in interceptions. If I recall correctly, all of them were red zone attempts. And we had 3 red zone turnovers. I think all of them were interceptions. And I was sitting here on pins and needles watching that game like, are we going to actually win this? Because we were dominating the game and just letting them hang around. So I would expect, I know, I would imagine Coach Simmons is probably seeing these numbers and he's looking to make it a little bit more explosive as well. And the next one, the rush offense, once again, speaks to what we saw. We dropped 70 spots from our 2021 output. And you just see across the board the number of attempts, the number of yards, the yards per rush, the rush TDs, and the yards per game all took significant drops. So I know that they have their eye on this stat. They don't need to be reminded of that. Passing yards went up. We compare, 2021 with Rashawn McKay and 2022 with Jeremy Musa. We went up 23 spots and ranked 28th overall in terms of passing yards. So we only had 3 more attempts. We had the same number of completions. There was no change there. I was surprised when I was running these numbers.
Right? I told you that's yeah.
But we had roughly 184, and I rounded up to 200 yards more. We had 1 fewer pass TD. We had 0.4 of a yard in terms of yards per attempt, and yards per completion, roughly 0.8. So it's modest. And we improved about 37 yards per game in terms of overall passing game. So we did see modest increase there, but once again, in terms of percentage, that'll be something that we'll look at. If we can get 60 or above, or if we have the 2-year jump that Ryan Stanley achieved from 2018 to 2019, if we something similar where we're in the mid-60s, this could be resembling some Billy Joe type offense from 98, 99. Scoring offense, we dropped 18 spots. As you can see, we had fewer TDs, missed 4 extra points or had some blocked. No change in 2-point conversions. Our points total, we were 52 fewer points overall as a team compared to 2021, and that reflects in our scoring average. So, we went from almost 28 points a game to 25 last year. And once again, we were speaking offline about that. We had an anomaly game. It wasn't explosive, but we had an anomaly game in the Orange Blossom Classic last year, scoring very few points and giving up a lot. So I don't know what our numbers would look like if we were closer to our average in terms of what the average games have been in terms of scoring and the overall final score. But I think we'll pick it up this year. Sacks allowed, we had 6 more sacks in 21. We dropped 37 spots. We had 6 more sacks. So I had +6, but it's red. So I wanted to at least hope that denotes that we had a decline in the number of, or not decline, we had increase in the number of sacks given up, and also subsequently increase the number of sack yards and the average of sacks given up per game. Penalties, we see we did improve 19 spots. And typically, that's across the board in terms of penalties. You get some on offense and some on defense. I just happened to group it with the offense because typically you think, okay, more offensive penalties have a detrimental effect in terms of stymieing drives and preventing scoring.
And this is a stat. Go ahead. You're gonna say what I think.
Real quick. The only thing I was gonna toss in with that one is the exception for us last year was that Grambling game. We almost lost that Grambling game because the defense kept getting personal fouls, hitting guys out of bounds and so forth. They scored on a punt return. They scored on because we got a penalty right before the half, hitting the quarterback out of bounds on the 3rd down, which we had him stop. And then the following kickoff, we didn't field the kickoff, and they recovered the daggum kickoff at the 3rd. We almost lost that game simply just off penalties and miscues. But
yeah, if Grambling had been a little better offensively, yeah, we definitely lose that game. But I was going to say the team penalties, that's a stat line, Marcus, that I bet everything should be red. Preferably, you'd want everything to be red and not green. Green is not. This is the one category where everything in green is not good.
How so?
Well, you're saying that the penalties increased, right?
No. They decreased.
Right.
So green is good in this instance.
Oh, okay.
So
okay.
we had. So
I read that.
Our rank was 19 fewer. Well, our rank was 19 spots improved from 2021. We had 20 fewer penalties. We had 250 fewer penalty yards.
I got you. Okay.
And so that's the kind of thing, some depending on these stats, you know, it's red or green, it kind of indicates. So it could be confusing. And even I had to go back and check myself, you know, when I'm doing, I was like, does this make sense? Does this make right? So I tried to get it so it's intuitive, but even sometimes I had to go back and correct my own stuff just because it was like, okay, that doesn't make sense. Total offense, we dropped 31 spots compared to 2021. So we had 71 fewer plays, and that really bugged me out. I was like, wow, 71 fewer plays. We had nearly 700 fewer yards. And I think a lot of that can be attributed to the run game and even the benefits of the run game when you can effectively pass rush. I'm sorry, play action pass and get the defense on their heels versus no, they're not going to run the ball, or they can't run the ball, so they got to throw it. So we see that differential, almost 700 yards fewer in terms of total yards, yards per play, offensive TDs, and yards per game. And time of possession, you know, once again, having a robust running game, you know, we dropped 31 spots, and total time of possession, we had 301 minutes, which is almost nearly 83. You know, if you round up the round numbers, 85 or 90 minutes of game time, fewer time that we had the ball, and an average of 2 minutes per game.
Can I add that it's interesting when you talk about those 71 fewer plays? You know what that is? That's almost that. Now, essentially, what that is, though, Marcus, so that you don't kind of look at this and say, "Man, essentially, that's one game." Mm-hmm. Remember, the year before we played 12 games, and we averaged. When I went back and looked at our average number of plays per game, we averaged just under 69 plays a game this past season. So, you know, that when you see that's one of those, you talk about those stats, that's where you talk about those 71 plays. Because I looked at that too, and I had to go back and realize in my numbers that, oh, wait a minute, we played 12 games in 2021 versus 11 games in 2022. And that's also why, you know, when you have to sort of, when you look at the total numbers and the total attempts that the rushing attempts, again, also might be a little off compared to 12 versus 11. So you almost have to kind of look at your average, maybe your yards per game or your average statistics instead of totals.
Good information, but we way in the weeds. I'm gonna do the COVID now.
All right. Well said. All right, we nerded out there. Me and Marcus have started to nerd out on these stats. I love it, though. Okay, let's shift over to the dark cloud defense here, because I know people are like, "What in the heck? These guys are going deep weeds here." Kind of. All right, dark cloud defense, man. Let's go. Kelvin, hit your bullet points. What do we need the defense to do to be successful?
Question number one, of course, is who develops at the edge rushers. My guess is Dre Jones and Anthony Dunn would be those guys who pick up from where Isaiah Land and Kamar Stevens left off. As indicated last year, they had a couple of games individually. They had at least one game where they had more than 3 sacks, and you know they got same length, same ability, and so our strength up front will be our defensive tackles. I mean, Mentor and Jenna Hunt and those guys, they've been there. Donna Hill, you know, they've all been there and played a lot of snaps. So the only real question for me on defense at all, I don't have 3 bullet points. I think they're going to be elite. I think it's going to be a lot of teams. Man, if our offense if they play up to their potential, the reason we're going to have those Billy Joe type scores is because when you set up this defense where all they got to do is sit back there and pin their ears back up front, and those ball hawking safeties and those quick linebackers we have, man, they're going to create a lot of turnovers. They're doing it right now during the fall.
Yes,
they're causing a lot of havoc because of with turnovers, and that's just going the way they're going to be. So my only question on defense, my only bullet point on defense is the edge rushers.
All right, Marcus, Do you? And this may be a good, Marcus. We talked about this offline, so let me know if you want to go to it. But what are your takeaways on the defense?
Well, similar to the offense, I got the players to watch in the hot seat. So players to watch, names we're familiar with. Javen Morgan, a name all-team second performer at the end of last year and first team this year. So he's going to be a ball hawk. And he's actually, I think he said he wanted to try to get double-digit interceptions this year. So he's going to be back there. Jordan Moore transitioning from the DB to linebacker in a stacked linebacker room. So it'll be interesting to see how and what he's utilized. Aforementioned Anthony Dunn had a breakout game in the Florida Classic, and he was a 3-star recruit coming out of Sanford Seminole High School, went to Marshall, then ended up transferring to us. And so, just seeing how he develops or continues to develop. And, and General Hunt, another name that made the preseason All-SWAC team this year and had a breakout year in 2021, and I thought 2022 was going to be his catapult. And he was steady, but he wasn't like the breakout that I thought may have happened in 2022. This might be his year. Isaiah Major, once again, receiving All-SWAC honors. On the hot seat, I'm going to say Coach Smitty Rock. And I say this only because if you look at 2021, and if we're using that as our frame of reference, and you'll see in a few minutes, a lot of numbers dropped. We're still top 10 in total defense, but some of the numbers dropped in terms of some of the finite, real specific numbers. So with all the talent he has coming back, there's going to be some expectations and in the last 2 years, we've probably been the second rated defense in the conference, only behind Jackson State, and Alabama State came up as well. But there's expectations not only from continuing that, but even a slight, even if it's minute, drop off compared to 2021 production on the defensive side of the ball. Other hot seat, special teams coordinator. At the time we initially wrote this, Coach Davis, Chili Davis, had taken a position at K-State, and we didn't know who that was going to be, and it hasn't been officially announced. We do believe that Doc Gamble, recently of UAPB, being head football coach there, is going to be named as the special teams coordinator. Now he doesn't, as far as I know, just looking at his resume from various sources, may not have had a lot of special teams experience. It's primarily an offensive side of the ball, and I believe he played quarterback in college and had more of an offensive type acumen. So it'll be interesting to see that we have basically a brand new slate, with the exception of Trey Wilhoit at the special teams core. At the punter position, we have a brand new slate in terms of kickers, potentially long snapper, unless Lawrence Martinez fends off the competition and secures the role as long snapper. But everyone else is brand new, including our special teams coach. Now, we still have Coach Spady, who played a dual role when he first came to FAMU as special teams coach and tight ends coach. So if he needs to lean on anybody, get some experience, and even probably during that interim period in the summer or early preseason camp, probably leaned on his experience for special teams. But that's going to be, like Kelvin said, an area of emphasis and intrigue based on all the newness from that unit in terms of from the coaching staff on down to the players. And my third hot seat, whoever wins the starting cornerback jobs, they have some shoes to fill with B.J. Bowler and Courtney Cox having departed. So they have some big shoes to fill. Now, Kendall Bowler we're presuming, is going to be on one side, and we don't know who's going to be other. Could be Winston Frazier. Could be someone else. Could be one of the transfers. Eric Smith. Now, I think he played a lot of slot. I think he filled in a DB, but I think he played a lot of slot before. So it'll be interesting to see what role he plays. What role he plays. And I know due to some injuries last year that Javen Morgan also played at cornerback out wide. So it'll be interesting to see who steps up on both roles, but assuming Kendall Bowler fills one, of who's on the opposite side and how well they perform. I think Winston Frazier played a couple good games last year and may have inside track, but we have a lot of transfers and a lot of athletes on that side of the ball. So it'll be interesting to see. And as far as my sneaky pick. I'm good. I've been holding on to this for the last couple of years and mentioned it in the pit. I like LaRodrick James. He's the same profile as Isaiah Land, about 6'2", 6'3", athletic. Came in as like a hybrid athlete, not quite as slim as Isaiah Land, but he's a hybrid linebacker, defensive back out of Gibbs High School. I think he's entering his 3rd year, so he came in the class of 2020 and bulked up a little bit. I saw some pictures online last year where he bulked up a little bit, and I don't know. I know we have a lot of folks, a lot of transfers that came in from various JUCOs and FBS schools on the defensive end. So he doesn't necessarily have the same size and girth as them. So we'll see. But when he first came, I saw him, and Isaiah Land developed in 2021. I thought he was going to be that next person to kind of fit that role, get bulked up, build out, capitalize on his speed, and be a speed rusher. So I'm going to hopefully he'll break out. I'll keep my eye on him as someone, because the last 2 years we've had Isaiah Land, then Kamari Stevens break out in terms of developing and surprising on the defense, whereas previously they were unheralded. So I was just kind of looking for someone to kind of fit that same mold, and that's what I'm kind of picking on.
On the defensive line, I want to see Sharif say, I mean, the 6'5", 250 thing just stands out to me, and it just is like, wow, okay. And he's got FCS experience. He's from Houston, played at Southeastern Louisiana. Would have played against us a couple years ago in a playoff game. I just seeing him in the spring game, he just stands out as just a big presence. And I think for somebody, I think he's an end. My God, I always wonder when you watch our guys, if we have guys that are rushing and are putting their hands up when they're rushing, we're going to make it hard for people to pass over the defense. But I don't look, I went back, and I'm not going to show, so we don't go too deep in the woods. And I know just that analysis chart that Marcus did, he did the same thing for defense. But I'll tell you, when we went through that, Marcus and Kelvin, when I looked at we were just to emphasize how great our defense was 2 years ago. You look at the defense last year, and we are a top 20, top 25 defense in the FCS, which is pretty doggone good. And I was just looking at the roster. I think the defense won 4 games last year. And you guys tell me whether you agree or disagree. I think they won the Albany State game. I think they won the South Carolina State game. I think they won the Grambling game.
Yep.
And I think they won the Alabama State game. That's 4.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, that's 4. And you could, if you wanted to, you could possibly throw the Southern game in there too. But legitimately, defense won 4 games. And so this year's defense, and so that team was a top 25 defense, which all the metrics are decreased or quote unquote worse than the year before. But again, when you go from being top 10 to top 25, yes, there's a decrease. Okay, there is. And
actually, in terms of like the total defense, we still remain top 10. We actually improved. We actually, in terms of total defense, we moved up a spot. We went from number 10 in 2021 to number 9 in 2022. Of course, that's comparing all FCS teams from NCAA.com. So, the numbers aren't bad. It's just a matter of, the frame of reference happens to be our 2021 season.
Right. The standard is the standard.
That team, that team averaged or allowed 17 points a game. Last year's team allowed 22.4. Guys, we're talking, five more points make a difference. But when your offense only scoring 25 points a game, that's a That's a 3-point margin. Compared to 21, the offense was scoring just under 28 a game. The defense was allowing 17. That's a 10, 11-point margin, right?
Right.
And go back to what I said. We were 8-2 against the spread. That means we were meeting expectations 80% of the time in those games. So this defense only has 4 starters, and I think that's going to throw people. But it's better. It's better than last year. We only have 4 projected starters returning, but it's better. That's all I got on the defense. Special team. Well, we special teams. We beat it to a dead horse. I'm not gonna beat special teams to a dead horse. We talked about it. Do you want to get into the schedule? Do you want to start? You want to move to the schedule because I know we're on time. Let's move through the schedule. Let's move through the schedule here. As we go from obviously, and I'm not gonna ask. I don't want to necessarily talk about predictions because we've talked about that, but I think we should talk about what's intriguing about the schedule and the opponent at that point in the season. I don't think I have to say much about week 1. It's Jackson State. I mean, every perception that the HBCU diaspora, to steal from my good friend Dr. Kenyatta Cavill, the HBCU diaspora will judge FAMU on week 1. The good thing for us is that we get to watch a Jackson State team that has 60 to 70 new players and a new coach go up against a South Carolina State team that is hungry, mad, not only about their season, but just a perception that, you know, they've run the MEAC and North Carolina Central sort of taking their shine, even though they beat North Carolina Central last year, mind you. Okay. Healthy. Yes. Yeah. So I think advantage plus. I like what you said earlier, Kelvin, about, hey, let's just kind of show up to Miami maybe Saturday morning. But I know we got obligations, so we got to show up Friday. But if it were me, I'd be like, hey, we're showing up Saturday morning or late Friday night. What kind, any talking points, bullet points you guys want to hit on about week 1 Jackson State?
Marcus?
Just jump in if there's anything. If not, we'll move to the next week.
Well, we got to show and prove. This is a lot of things. Even Coach said this is Celebration Bowl or bust. So game 1 is where that journey begins. So we got to show and prove, stop that losing streak, and go from there.
Mm-hmm. You know, I usually don't get into, you know, the opponents. It usually for me is about the Rattlers and how we show up and stuff. But this game is a conflict for me because of their fan base. Do you know how unbearable they will be? I mean, I don't care what we got to do. We got to win this game.
How unbearable they've been? You mean they're going to be more unbearable?
Oh, yes. Yes, that's exactly what I mean. So I ain't got a whole lot to say, man. We have to win this game, and it would be nice if we win it convincingly.
Mm-hmm. That game September 3rd. Moving over to September 9th. That's a 6-day turnaround. We go to Tampa to take on South Florida. Now, Tampa's record last year was 1-11. 1-11. Their only win was against FCS Howard, right from the MEAC. Okay, they beat Howard last year, 42-20. That was their only.
And win. Howard played well.
Yes, yeah. And So we realized that was not a bad Howard team. I mean, obviously co-champs in the MEAC. But South Florida has a new coach. Alex Galesh, he's a first-year coach, first-year overall. Projected, South Florida has 4 offensive starters returning, 9 projected starters on the defensive side of the ball. we felt pretty good about FAMU 2 years ago when they traveled to South Florida. I know it is hard for an FCS program to beat an FBS program, but how do you feel this year playing USF juxtaposed 2 years ago, Marcus?
Well, I know there's at least one, maybe multiple publications that print out potential upsets in terms of probability of the FCS versus FBS teams, and a couple of publications have mentioned this game. I think you look at our experience and depth, and them coming off a 1-11 season with their only other win being against the FCS opponent, like vintage Lee Corso used to say, this might be closer than the experts think. And depending on our mentality and our perspective coming out of the Orange Blossom Classic, this has a potential to, be closer than the experts think and could be an upset. Because 2 years ago when we played them, I mean, I think it was them. Yeah, I think it was USF. We relied on the running game late. That's the game where Chris Fadul got hurt. He had a knee injury when they ran into him. But early on, it seemed like we were trying to, and this was with Rashawn McKay, we were trying to sling the ball. But then when we started running the ball, the depth eventually caught up with us in the fourth quarter. But we started running the ball. I've seen to remember Terrell Jennings and Jalen McLeod had a field day.
Yeah.
I mean, they were going off.
Yeah.
And if we had started out that way, we don't know to what degree. Now, we couldn't stop their QB at the time. I think he since transferred. I want to say Tim McKay or someone like that. But
yeah, he's gone. He's
correct.
Not there.
He did.
But I mean, he came as a freshman, and he was a 3-star quarterback for them, and he was just an athlete. So we didn't have a very successful time stopping him all game.
Yeah.
But the game plan going in, if we had started out the run, if we had or recognized it earlier on, and I think we actually got a turnover early on. I think Marquise Bell got an interception or caused a fumble when they were driving in the red zone and like the opening drive.
We did.
And so it's like we don't know what their disposition is and their talent level. They have a first-year coaching staff. We don't know how much depth they have, and we seem to have a lot of depth from players from other schools and returning some of our better players. So yeah, I got this. I do have this one chalked up as
upset alert. Are you putting South Florida on upset alert, Marcus? That's what I hear.
Well, I'm looking at my list. I don't have them on upset alert, but I wouldn't be surprised if it happened.
All right, your thoughts, Kelvin. Kelvin, your thoughts.
I'm gonna be a little more succinct. They played Western Kentucky their first game. Yeah. So they played Western Kentucky the week before us. So when we played Jackson State, they lost their best offensive player, who's a receiver who went with Dion to Colorado from last year's team. They bring it in, they transfer a running back from University of Florida who transferred in. You talk about those 9 defensive players that they had returning, but they were like dead last in defense in FBS, and particularly against the run. They gave up over 200 yards a game. So I say that to say this would be an excellent opportunity of an upset. The intangibles for me is going to be what they always are and what I've already said. Is Musa elite? Is Coach Simmons' play calling going to be conducive to give us a chance so we score early or we stay in the game early? Because I think our defense can hold them at bay and keep us in the game. But we can't turn the ball over and go 3 and out constantly the first quarter.
A couple of nuggets that I will add to this. South Florida plays Alabama. They host Alabama the following week in Raymond James. So talk about looking ahead. Talk about a trap game. Here we come after hopefully a win against Jackson State. Here come the Rattlers. Oh, they're FCS. We ain't got to worry about it. We're focused on Alabama. Okay. y'all go ahead and look ahead to Alabama next week. And if the Vegas line works off of the predictions from the analytics, they predict South Florida to be at least a 27 to 28 point favorite. I am gathering up a paycheck and throwing it all on FAMU to cover 27, 28 points when that game happens. I don't know what the money line is going to look like, but FAMU to cover, stone cold lock of the season. I'm telling you that now. I had no other bet. Just put money on FAMU to cover. If you see it 4 touchdowns, now 4. If you see it less than that, walk away. But if it's 4 touchdowns, take FAMU into points. That's all I'm going to say. The following week, following Saturday, September 16th, FAMU, home opener, the dedication of Ken Riley Field as we take on Division II Power, a young Division II program, but they've already won a national championship. West Florida. I have mixed thoughts about this. Marcus, what are your thoughts about this game? Home opener against Division II West Florida.
Are you going prediction win-loss or just our general thoughts?
No, just general thoughts. We don't have to do wins and losses now. This is more, I mean,
yeah, I think
go with
it'll be a test because we actually played them, was it 2020 or 2021? It was during COVID where they allowed like scrimmaging against other teams. I don't know how it went, because it was a closed scrimmage, but my understanding is
they were competitive.
Yes, they were competitive. Now they do. I think they have a new coach too. I think their coach just got hired away. I don't remember where he went.
But he came from Clemson. Yeah, their head coach came from Clemson for the last 2 years. He was assistant to their head coach up there. But he came from West Florida. He played quarterback at West Florida. He was their first quarterback, if I'm not mistaken. And so he a previous offensive coordinator there. So he's familiar with the program. And also their offensive coordinator is Ron Dickerson Jr., who was, of course, at Jackson State and a couple other HBCUs as a head coach. So he's familiar with SWAC football. So those two things are very interesting, along with they got that quarterback who was a 4 or 5 star that was committed to the University of Florida and got caught saying the N-word on a rap song. And when Albany was going to Albany, had committed to Albany State, but then all that, blew up. And so he's at West Florida. So they're currently the number 7 ranked team in Division II also this year in preseason. So I was less until I really started doing my research. I was less, Bryan was really worried about this game. I wasn't because, it's Bragg. But I'm a little more worried than I would be, especially if we beat Jackson State and play close or beat South Florida.
Yeah, we don't want complacency to set in because of either, early season success and or the fact that we know this year we're not vying for the playoff spot. So the 2 D2 games, we're like, okay, these are these are scheduled games that won't deter us from our ultimate goal of the Celebration Bowl. They won't have an impact. So you don't want complacency to set in, especially if we were 2-0 going into that game or 1-1 with very close production against USF.
Yeah, West Florida becomes our trap game, right? Yep. If we start out 2-0, or as you just said, 1-1 with one of those losses, maybe to South Florida by maybe like a touchdown or 10 points, and we come out of there saying, damn, we should have beat them. Yeah, the West Florida becomes a trap game at home. So that's let's just call it what it is. So we will have to keep our eyes open for that West Florida contest. And then the following week, September 23rd, our second consecutive home game, we take on and host Alabama State. Alabama State is a team that obviously we remember last year on the road We beat 21-14, thanks in part to the blocked field goal attempt return for a touchdown. And then in 2021, when we hosted them, we beat them 28-0. I believe that was the debut of Isaiah Land in that game too, if I'm not mistaken. What kind of thoughts do you have about the Alabama State game, who many people are kind of bullish on in the Eastern Division this year?
Well, I think that's going to be our biggest competition.
Alabama State, really?
Yeah. I mean, just the way their defense plays.
No.
I don't know about their offense, but their defense, I mean, of course, there were a lot of miscues on our part when we played them. But you look at their defense in terms of statistics and even the way they played us. I mean, we made the mistakes, but they took advantage of it, at least up to that point. And it was a defensive struggle. So I'm thinking if they get – well, their defense we know is going to come. We just don't know what the offense is going to look like. So it'll depend on that. Now, we're playing them at home, and so that's a distinct advantage for us. So I don't know to what degree, how they're traveling. And Coach Robinson is his second year now, so he's not a rookie coach anymore. So to me, I think that might be our toughest game, but I think we'll still prevail on top because we have too much.
I love. Go ahead, Kelvin. You're shaking your head. You don't see any competition in this game, or what are you thinking here?
We blew them out at home 2 years ago. We should have blown them out last year. We missed 4 field goals and like 3 red zone interceptions, and we still found a way to win that game in the coldest game we played in. They're just not good enough. Their defensive stats. They are pretty good defense and competitive defensive team, but that's because they rely on their defense. They did so little offensively. Their defensive players have a lot of opportunities. So unless now if they get good quarterback play, then hush my mouth. But until I see them as a better offensive team, I don't see them as a threat. They're a 3 to 4 touchdown underdog to us. And that's based on the last 2 years.
Interesting. 3 to 4 touchdown. I don't know if there's I don't know if there's any way that we are that big of a favorite. Just a few points here about Alabama State. They're coming off a bye, okay, before they play us. So earlier in their schedule, they would have played Southern. They would have played Miles College, excuse me. So coming off a bye when they're coming to FAMU. And just historically, the record of Alabama State against FAMU in 41 games played, FAMU is 19-20-2 historically against Alabama State. So
this is not a historic game. This is a this year game.
I love your perspective. See how all this hard research that I come and I gather up Marcus, and he just poo-poos it just like that. I love Kelvin. I love how Kelvin does that every time. That's
a good stat, though. That's a good stat.
I appreciate it. Thank you. That's all you can say. You can at least give me a little prop for a little few stats, man. Okay. Last, well, no, not last, but the after 2 games at home, September 30th, our 5th game in the month of September, we're traveling out to Mississippi Valley State. Last year, against Valley, we defeated them 34-7. Yep. 2 years ago, 31-28 was the final. It was a closer game than where it was. I think we jumped out to like a 14, 17-point lead, and then it got close all of a sudden.
Yep.
Yeah, we had some blown coverages, and they started running that running back. Who was it? Caleb Johnson? Is that his name?
That was his name. Yep.
He transferred to PV since then, but yeah, that one was glue. So that's when K-Dot had his breakout. I think he had two returns, 2 punt return TDs, and I think he caught one. So he had like at least 3 TDs that game. He was the savior.
What?
Maybe 4.
I'm trying to find. Go ahead.
One of the only bad defensive games in the Ricky Smith-Rock era as a defense coordinator. That was one of the few bad games. I mean, it was just basically dropping back, throwing bombs, and hitting them. So, that is a difficult game. I noticed that it didn't go past me that one of our players said one of the most difficult environments to play in. And I know he wasn't saying it from the standpoint of crowd and intimidation. I know he was saying it in the sense of, there's very little people in the stands. There's not much of an atmosphere. And at home, they feel be in better condition now, but in the previous years, they feel been, kind of worn out and, kind of slow for a team like us, slow us down. But they play tough, man. They scrappy.
Yeah.
I mean, so they are for me, a team like that. I expect our team to get up for the Southerns and the traditional rivalries. It's hard for us to get up for them, and they're gonna punch in them out. So
yeah,
we're gonna win.
It's a long trip.
We'll win. We'll win this game, but this is one we have to bring our lunch pail and our hard hat.
Yeah, Mississippi Valley State head coach Kendrick Wade in his first year. Wade for Valley, they would have played North Carolina Central the week before in Indianapolis. So they're playing in the Circle City Classic the week before. And 2 weeks before, they would have played at Delta State, a Division II opponent. So a tough Division II opponent. So Valley's coming into that game with us. Right. Yeah. They're coming in that game hot. So, you said it perfectly when you said that's a game BYOB, bring your own, no, BYOG, bring your own guts. That's as Dabo said one day famously, that's a BYOG, bring your own guts, because you may have to show and prove. Bring a lunch pail. That's a game where everybody on the team ought to get issued some hard hats, because we got to go to work. Guys got to go to work that day. All right.
Yeah.
Well, after Valley comes up I would circle this as one of the, outside of Jackson State, this is probably the second biggest matchup of the season. We travel to Southern. October 7th, Southern predicted to finish first in the West. So many people, depending upon what Southern does, and especially depending upon what Southern does against Jackson State. So there's another comparison that'll be happening by about October. We would have played Jackson State. They would have played Jackson State. How our two teams do against Jackson State will be compared and contrasted ad nauseum leading into that contest. We remember last year we defeated them 30-16 at home. 2 years ago, we traveled out to Southern, beat them 29-17. What's your thoughts about traveling to the Bluff and taking on Southern, Marcus?
Well, it's always going to be a tough game because it's Southern. Our longest rival went out the conference game, but it was our longest non-conference rival. And, the coach, I heard Coach Simmons say in a 20 quarterback club, there's something about that. He said one of the corners in the end zone where the instant replay get a little shaky, or the play call or something gets a little shaky. You never know what's going on. And so, and you got a savvy vet as a head coach. I mean, he came from PV. He played at Southern. So that's going to be probably, no, I guess this may be one of our toughest games. I'm thinking maybe second toughest behind Alabama and Alabama State. I know Kelvin may disagree and think this is the toughest game based on environment, history, and all that stuff. So yeah, this is going to be, we're going to have 2 lunch pail games in a row. Valley because of the travel and the atmosphere, and Southern just because it's Southern.
What do you want to add there, Kelvin?
This is going to be the showdown. This could determine who hosts the SWAC championship game also.
Yes,
so,
it could.
So Southern has a, they have Willie Todd as quarterback coach. They brought in some transfers. They already got a stacked running back room and the receivers return. So if I'm anticipating they're going to have better quarterback play. So from an offensive standpoint, I anticipate they'll be typical Southern, right? So this is a game I think with a grad student quarterback and Musa. This is a Musa game here. He gonna have to come to play. He gonna have to be on for us to come out there with a W with that one. But this is my game of the year for the Rattlers.
Yeah, so Southern is going to be fired up. They've lost to us 3 consecutive seasons in a row. Now, Southern is that you mentioned. It's one of those rivals. We played the 3rd most games against Southern, so this will be game number 63 in the history, which is 3rd behind North Carolina A&T and Bethune. So, FAMU with a 35-26-1 record over Southern. Take note of the fact that we've won the last 3 years. I didn't mark down what our record was at Southern. But for Southern, you mentioned Harold Blood is the quarterback that a lot of people Southern is really excited about. 6 offensive returners, 5 defensive returners. This is the 2nd year under Eric Dooley. Of course, Coach Dooley, Coach Simmons, both worked together at Alcorn, or was it Prairie View? Prairie View. Maybe both places, matter of fact. But I know definitely Prairie View. Dooley is the one who actually came after Coach Simmons at Prairie View. So there's a lot of familiarity there between these 2 coaches. Great way to start October. Put it like that, right? October is just that month. So October 14th, FAMU has a bye. And we get ready for the second half of the season, the final 5 games, when we travel to Houston on October 21st to take on Texas Southern. And it should be noted that as I kind of breeze through my book here, FAMU has only played Texas Southern 11 times prior to the last time they played Texas Southern, 1968. The last time FAMU has played an HBCU in the state of Texas, you got to almost go back into the 40s. It's been that long since FAMU has traveled to Houston. So I know for a fact, Houston Rattlers, Rattler Nation out there in Texas, really excited to travel to this game in Houston. What's your thoughts here, Marcus, on this contest against Texas Southern and playing against Andrew Body?
Well, the defense is going to have to come. Well, I don't know what the rest of the offense looks like. They're going to have to come. I think this is where Sharif Say and all those defensive linemen, all the ones who recruited and signed up, they're going to have to make him very uncomfortable to make sure that, going into Houston and the first time in a long time, and I think it's the first time a lot of our players, if all of them, going to Texas. So that'll be a nice little trip. But, make him uncomfortable, let the defense do their thing and bring some dark clouds in Houston and have a steady game from the offense. I think we'll be okay here. It is a late game. It'll be 8 p.m. Central. I'm sorry, 7 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Eastern. So that's a late game for us. Once again, you have
so they've already released the time on that?
Yes, I'm looking at our FAMU website now. They have times for every game with the exception of the Mississippi Valley game and the Alabama A&M game.
What's interesting about that is it's the same day as Houston versus Texas, or I should say Texas is playing Houston in Houston, and that's a big, that's two Southwestern Conference rivals. There's a lot of history in the state. I'm surprised that game is being played, that FAMU game is being played at night. I would hope for traffic concerns, that means the Houston, Texas game is an afternoon game for television purposes, because I can't imagine they would play both games at the same time in the evening. But Texas Southern has 10 returning starters on offense, Kelvin. And does that give you any pause, concern?
Absolutely. They're talented. They got some transfers in also on the opposite side of the ball. Now they do have a challenging schedule coming up to that game, but Andrew Body, I know, respects Coach Simmons and our program, and really is going to want to put on a show against us. This is, like as you stated, it's the first time that a lot of the Texas Southern team has had opportunity to go against a FAMU squad. And also, we have quite a few players on our squad that'll be going home that are Texas natives. So you got a lot of things going on. And as you said, you talk about Houston, Dallas, Metro Dallas, and the Texans and the Midwest Rattlers. Well, like I can tell you now, I know no less than 20 to 30 Rattlers who from Florida, DC, and elsewhere was flying in for that game. Already got their tickets and all. We have a group going, so there's a lot of buzz around this game. So I do think Rattler Nation going to show out, and ultimately, I just think we're talented, and our defense is consistent. It's going to be the difference in this game, but it could be a shootout though.
Yeah, for sure. That'll be real interesting to see what that game looks like. I was trying to see if I had my analytic notes here regarding that Texas Southern contest for FAMU. Yeah, that's going to be a close one. FAMU will be a favorite on the road, but should probably be at least, by a touchdown or less, according to the metrics. Okay, so after traveling to Texas, the Rattlers will come back home for homecoming, October 28th, and we will host Prairie View A&M. Coach Simmons' first contest against his former school, if I'm not mistaken. It is the first time. And so the last time FAMU played Prairie View A&M, just kind of looking this up here in the media guide, 1959.
Goodness gracious.
Yeah, FAMU has a 5-3 record. I told you the last time we've been to Texas, it's been a long time. So you just look at the last time that we played Prairie View A&M, 1959. So here comes Prairie View. Coach Bubba McDowell in his second year. They also return a starting quarterback. One of the few SWAC schools that have a returner starting this season. So homecoming, we all know how challenging homecoming is for the opponent. Prairie View will have a bye week before they play us, so they got plenty of time to sort of really drive over. They can actually physically watch us in person. They don't even have to get on TV. They don't even have to turn on TV. They can just drive over to Texas Southern's home site and watch the game live in person if they wanted to self-scout. So what's your thoughts on Prairie View coming to town? I'll start with you, Kelvin.
They got a returning quarterback. I find it interesting that FAMU plays 3 of the top 4 teams in the West. So, and we playing them back-to-back actually, right? With 2 of them being on the road. So yeah, this is a game that could be competitive, and that honestly, I think we'll win. But I think it's going to be competitive for a couple of reasons. One, Prairie View is talented enough, and they got something they're going in that open week before gives them time to even dial in for that environment they're going to see. And then two, we're playing so many quality opponents, and then it's homecoming where there's so many activities and distractions. So, just like last year against Pine Bluff, it took us a quarter to really get going. And so I just think that especially early, this game probably is going to be extremely competitive. And hopefully our defense can hold up and they don't get a lead. Because if they jump out on us, man, it could be a dogfight. But ultimately, I think we'll, we don't lose in brag. And I stand on that until we do.
Marcus, your thoughts?
Same thing. Plus, we unleashed the distraction committee on them. So, between all that and we're on a mission. And so all that senior leadership and experience we have on a defensive line, offensive line, defensive backfield, running back, this is where, okay, the distraction committee is for the visiting team, not for us. We want to be in Atlanta in December. So this is where all that comes into play to make sure that the main thing stays the main thing.
FAMU will be just a slight favorite, at least according to the preseason projections, by just maybe a field goal, against Prairie View, which, pretty much that's basically saying it's an even ball game. Given a 3-point home favorite, giving 3 points to the home team, that in a 3-point line, that it's going to be interesting for us. So that just kind of underscores how important that game will be. All right, so after homecoming, we move into the month of November 4th, and we travel to Alabama A&M. And Alabama A&M also is another team that has 10 offensive starters returning projected. And so there's 3 of them in the conference, us, Texas Southern, and Alabama A&M. And, of course, we play both of those 2 teams. So talk about all the things that our defense has to be prepared for. Of course, Connell Maynor in his 8th year at Alabama A&M. That team went 4-7 a year ago. Nobody will forget the contest 2 seasons ago and what Florida A&M did to win that contest 35-31, thanks to Bishop Bonnet and that big 80-yard touchdown in the 4th quarter. But it was also a game in which we had a lead. We kind of lost the lead and then had to, have some heroics to win the ball game. Last year, we didn't struggle nearly as much, but there was a bit of a struggle a year ago against Alabama A&M. 38-25 was the victory. Little chippiness at the end of the ball game. What's your thoughts, Kelvin, on traveling to Alabama A&M, Huntsville, for this one?
If you've watched the last 2 seasons with Alabama A&M, they tend to be pretty good at the end of the season. That's when they pick up a lot of their victories. Now, part of that is the reason they have such a difficult early schedule when they play out of conference, as well as having to play FAMU and Jackson State. Usually those games are early. But at the end of the day, they usually find a footing somewhere in the middle of the season. They go on a little run. This is, to me, the most dangerous game on our schedule. Because Connell Maynor is not afraid of Willie Simmons and FAMU, Bryan, and all that. He's got a gunslinger mentality, and he brought in 50 transfers last year. It didn't come together fast enough for him last year, but I'm projecting him to make a really jump. This is a team, in my opinion. Everybody talking about Alabama State. This is the Alabama team you got to worry about. I think potentially they can make the biggest jump. They got a new turf. They got nice facilities there. They open up that gym up there. They got a new dome up there. They got a lot of construction happening up there. Maynor's going to have an experienced team, and he's an experienced coach. and you know, Huntsville that time of year is cold, it's a little windy because you got mountains around there. So so this is our most dangerous game of the year for me. And I expect us to win, but I expect it to be a dog fight, and it's probably gonna be a 4-quarter game.
What are your thoughts, Marcus?
Yeah, there's not much more to add. I mean, you look at the last two games. We had a dogfight in Huntsville 2 years ago, and you know they had the weird interception off of Xavier Smith, you know, popping the ball up in the air. We had to have heroics from an 80-yard run from Bishop Bonnet. Last year in the first half, or actually the first quarter, they were handing it to us.
Yeah.
I mean, they were handing it to us good, and then you know things got right, and then it pulled a little bit closer in the second half. But that first half, I was sitting there, and that was the game I came down. I was like, "What the heck is going on here?" And they were talking mad crap. I think they scored their 19 points in the first half, and I don't remember what the halftime score was, but I wasn't feeling happy, and so you can't really sleep on them. And you know they've had a couple of mediocre seasons, and they're looking to turn the corner. They probably had expectations too. So yeah, this could, especially late in the season, this is where depth is going to come into play.
Yeah, Alabama. You know, it is interesting looking at our road schedule. You know, you just point out Alabama A&M, Texas Southern, Valley, USF. They all have a unique. I mean, you have to really be focused in these road games. I mean, because of something either going on the week before, or just the nature. I mean, imagine coming off a homecoming, then having to travel to go play Alabama A&M, which could very well be a game that may cement and wrap up the Eastern Division.
Correct.
So add that kind of pressure to what that Alabama A&M game might mean, and it really is another sticking point to this road schedule that FAMU plays this upcoming season. November 11th, we finish off the home schedule against Lincoln of California, Division II school. There's not much to say here. I'm not going to spend time on that game. And then after that game, we have the Florida Classic on November 18th against Bethune. We've won the last 2 years. Bethune has 9 defensive starters on their roster. Coach Raymond Woody, I believe, wasn't he a defensive guy? Raymond Woody Jr. But anyway, you know, okay, I thought so. So that bodes well while they try to figure out things on the offensive end. Who knows? Bethune is one of those big mysteries. You don't know really. No one knows what Bethune is really going to be. You know, could the wheels be falling off at that point in the season, or you know, could they really be fighting for a 500 season? And I think it'd be a dangerous Bethune-Cookman team that's coming in at 5-5 versus a 2-8 or 3.
I don't think it matters, Brian. If we get to that game with the East wrapped up and the SWAC championship game on our mind, we're gonna hand them a serious L. All right, I expect to get them an L anyway, but I don't think it matters if we handle business. It'll be a lot to ask. But I will say this about Bethune this year. This year, I think they're gonna get somebody. All right, they're gonna they still have Florida talent. They still have belief, right? They know they got talent. They can play with some teams. You know, you look at their season last year and the games they lost. I mean, they just, a lot of those games they lost, you know, in the last quarter. You know, and that's with no quarterback play. The one thing I think Woody will do is he'll be more of a disciplinarian, so their teams won't make the same mental mistakes and penalties and turnovers. And you add that with the Florida talent, they're gonna get one or two teams this year, and I just hope it ain't us.
Right. What do you want to add about that final regular season game, Marcus?
This is going to have to be the nail in the coffin to make sure that we're reaching towards our goals, you know, in terms of the regular season.
Yeah, the that contest really strikes me from the standpoint of the following week is really a bye week. If let's just say we meet our expectations and our goals, and we are playing in the SWAC championship, the following week's a bye week. So it is really an opportunity to kind of to let your hair out and really go blast somebody. I mean, there's an opportunity. You're going to get up for your rival, and we should never forget 9 in a row. I mean, that should constantly. I don't care that we won 2 in a row. We lost 9. We lost for a decade. There was a decade of loss to Bethune-Cookman. And as insufferable as Jackson State fans have been over the last 2 years, it pales in comparison to dealing with Wildcat Nation for a decade. So there's an opportunity for our guys to really let their hair down and get ready, get loose, and then they got a bye week before it's time to get ready for the SWAC championship game, which is the first weekend of December. I believe the schedule
December 2nd.
December 2nd, and hopefully it'll be in Tallahassee. That'd be a beautiful thing.
4 o'clock Eastern time.
Yeah, somewhere, hopefully in Tallahassee. All right. Final thoughts here as we get ready to put an end. We appreciate you watching. Hopefully you've enjoyed this deep dive of FAMU football as the season preview is here. We're going to end this show with just a final prediction, not only about the SWAC East West, but also the SWAC championship game, the MEAC Celebration Bowl. So here we go. Let's see what we think. SWAC East, not only who finishes first, but who finishes second. So Marcus, I'll start with you. Who wins the SWAC East? Who finishes second?
Well, I mean, I got our record, you know, being pretty stellar. So we're going to win the SWAC East. And I'm going to stick with my guns. I'm going to say the second is going to be Alabama State.
Okay. Kelvin, what about you?
I'm going to pick us as well. We should go undefeated, but until I see Moose's growth and Coach Simmons' play calling, I'm going to say we're going to go 7-1, though. We're not going to go undefeated in the SWAC play. But we'll still win the East, and I'm going to pick Alabama A&M as number 2.
Good point. Yeah, I think we're ripe to go 8-0 in the division. We'll go unbeaten against the Eastern Division foes.
Right.
Put it like that. I'll say we'll go unbeaten against Eastern Division foes. That part I will predict. And I'm going to go with you. You convinced me. You sold me on the Alabama A&M finishing 2. I will say this, though. The winner of the I'll go even better. Winner of the Magic City will finish second. I'll go. So whoever comes out of it, I'll play the middle here with what you two guys said. All right, over in the West, who wins the West? Marcus?
I'm going to stick with Southern. I mean, they won it last year. And with improved quarterback play, and if their defense stays the same, because I was looking at some of the numbers, I think they were either second or third in the SWAC in terms of total sacks. So if they keep that same level of defense up, even though I don't think nationally they were at the same level as FAMU, Jackson State, and Alabama State, but I think they have enough experience returning and improved quarterback play that they'll win the West. And second, I'm going to say Alcorn.
Kelvin, go ahead.
I'm going to switch out, man. I have been pretty doggish last year and going into this thing, but I kind of reevaluated and looked at what's going on here. And, you know, I had been adamant that the winner of the West was going to have 3 conference losses. I'm going to predict a team to have only 2 conference losses. And the reason why I'm not going to predict Southern is because of their schedule. Even though they got a lot of those games at home, they're just playing too many rival teams back to back. They're not going to get through that unscathed. And the team that's got the best defense and the most approved, but has that pedigree, is Alcorn State. So I'm predicting Alcorn #1 and the Southern #2. And I'm predicting a FAMU Alcorn Celebration Bowl in Tallahassee.
SWAC championship game in Tallahassee.
I mean, yeah, correct.
Yeah, I'm going. I said Southern back at the SWAC Media Day. I've been wrong. I've been like off by 1, so I'll stick with Southern. But I think my #2 is Alcorn, and so I picked Alcorn last year and had Southern second, and so maybe this year it'll flip and we'll get that SWAC championship game. I'm going FAMU over Southern in the SWAC championship game. Obviously, Kelvin, you got FAMU over Alcorn. And who did you pick, Marcus? You picked Southern as well?
I did.
All right, so you got a FAMU Southern SWAC championship game. All right, no surprises there by any of us. Who wins the MEAC? Who wins the MEAC this year, Marcus?
That is interesting. It's hard to go against the champ because NC Central's you got to beat a man, you got to beat the man. But I don't know. I think Howard's going to beat the man. I'm going to pick Howard.
Kelvin.
So I like to stick with what I know when I'm making projections or predictions. I know what Central is and what they have at quarterback, and Trey Oliver has proven himself as a head coach. However, I know what Buddy Poe is too, and he has a returning 6-year quarterback, and they have a chip on their shoulder, and they beat Central last year. They got banged up and injured, and so the back half of their schedule, they didn't win it, but they got more depth. Had they been more healthy down the stretch, they would have went to the celebration post, in my opinion. So, and then the one thing I do not know, and I think Howard will be in the running too, and Morgan probably will upset one of those three. But the one thing I do not know about Central, which is why I'm not picking them, is how they are as a front runner. They're going to get everybody the best shot.
Yeah.
Nobody saw them coming last year. Now they the big dogs on the block. And they didn't blow anybody out but Howard in the conference. They struggled to win a lot of those games. And like I said, they lost to South Carolina State. So I'm going to go with Buddy and South Carolina State Bulldogs.
My buddy. I'm going to go. So I got 3 teams. I'm going. So here's my thought. I'm going South Carolina State over Central. Central to beat Howard, and Howard to beat South Carolina State.
I can see that.
Now, the question is, who's going to slip up to Morgan State or Norfolk State? Those are the 2 teams. Who's going to drop a game to them by accident? And so I'm kind of like with you, Marcus. I think Howard, put it like this, I'm going to root for Howard. I think it's interesting. I think it's an interesting spot to see Howard in. So I will root for Howard to win the MEAC, thus creating, which our next question is, who wins the Celebration Bowl? Because for me and Marcus, it sounds like we have a FAMU versus Howard, an old MEAC showdown in Atlanta. Kelvin, you got who's your Celebration Bowl again?
South Carolina State.
FAMU.
Ooh. That adds intrigue to the 2024 schedule.
Oh my God, I know, right? Because that's the 2. Yeah. Oh, geez. So Hold on. I'll save Marcus, since you and I both have the same game. I'll go to Kelvin first. Who wins the Celebration Bowl, Kelvin?
Man, you make it to the Celebration Bowl. A former MEAC member will be the first SWAC school to win the Celebration Bowl in what, 8-9 years.
You know what's so funny?
In Atlanta, it's going to be it's going to be a large FAMU contingent. You know, there's no way if FAMU make it to Atlanta Celebration Bowl, there's no way anybody, I don't care how good they are, going to be FAMU. It's going to be a celebration.
You know, the MEAC, even if the SWAC and FAMU wins, the MEAC will still somehow find a way to claim. MEAC fans will still find a way to claim victory of that Celebration Bowl. And they'll be like, see, it took a former MEAC member to actually get SWAC its first title in however many years. Marcus, you and I both have Howard. What's your take there?
Well, I think we're going to win if we play Howard. I think the defense, the depth, and I haven't studied their roster in depth, so I'll have to take a look at it. But I'm pretty sure we'll win that game. And I think just all the horses that we have in terms of offense, defense, special teams, once they get in alignment, and just having overall the sheer number of players and talent, just wouldn't be able to. Just won't allow Howard to come through on that game. Plus, we have a short travel. They have long travel.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They do not have a conference title game, so they'll have a few weeks rested. But once again, that could play a role. We would be off for 2 weeks. They'll be off for nearly a month. If
Yeah, it should be a good crowd. It should be a great crowd in Atlanta. Howard alums will show up.
Plus, when 100 makes it in the top 2 for the Division I.
There you go. Playing the night before.
The band there. So I'm speaking that it exists. We got the band there. We got all the FAMU alums basically coming from everywhere.
It just kind of works.
It
kind of works. Buy your tickets now. Celebration Bowl 2023. Buy your tickets now in anticipation of as soon as they go on sale, Rattler Nation, you got to go buy your tickets. All right, fellas. Well, that's going to put it into this preview. Want to remind you, if you haven't bought your Orange Blossom Classic tickets, it's not too late. You can buy premium club level tickets behind the Marching 100 for only at $109. That's section 249, or if that section sells out, text section 250. Use the code BCSN or StrikeZone at the checkout. JustLookingOut.com is the website. Our good friend Mike Reed, Road Dogg, has set this up, so you actually be helping support this show by purchasing your club level seats from him. There's his contact information. Make sure to contact him via the number below, or send the Cash App or Zelle your tickets, and he will take care of you. Again, JustLookingOut.com. Use the code BCSN or StrikeZone when you check out. All right, guys. Well, hey, man, this has been fun. Wow, what a deep dive! And again, if you're still watching at this point, God bless you. Thank you. And I'm assuming people might take a break, come back. I don't know how to cut this up into segments, but
3 hours and 3 hours and 20 minutes.
If you went the whole 3 hours,
you're gonna do a part 1 and part 2.
The whole 3 hours straight, man. We got a chicken bone for you when we see you at the next tailgate. Whenever we do an O&G tailgate, we have to give you a rib, maybe 2 rib bones or something, or a chicken leg or something, just to say.
It may not be at Bragg though.
No, don't go there. Don't go there. Don't say that. People are like, what? What is he talking about? Don't worry about that. Don't worry about that.
Nothing.
That's another show, another topic. Another show, another topic. All right. So again, make sure you're following the guys. Make sure you're following Marcus on X. And same way as Kelvin. Let us know your thoughts on the upcoming season, players to watch, thoughts and perspective on the analysis. We want to hear from you. Make sure you're leaving comments. If you're watching us on YouTube or Facebook, leave your thoughts with us. And we look forward to this season 2023. should be an excellent season for the Rattlers. We're looking forward to it, starting with our opening game against Jackson State, and that's where it all will begin. So for my co-hosts, Marcus Green and Kelvin Rozier, I'm Bryan Fulford. We thank you for watching and supporting. And as always, make sure this season, everywhere you go, that you put those fangs up and that you strike, and strike again. Peace out, everybody.